Hello, welcome back to Adobelive, everyone. My name is Voodoo Val, and I am going to be your host for a fantastic segment today with my friend, Cory Hall. Cory, how are you doing today?
I am doing awesome. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm super pumped to be here with you as well. It is going to be so much fun just to hang around, pal around and get some cool designs going. We are going to be working on making thumb-stopping Instagram posts, which I just think is like super, super cool. Definitely something I know folks in chat are going to be excited about. But before we kind of dive into our plan for the day and learning a little bit about you, for those who don't know, I just want to remind everyone, if you have not already, definitely subscribe to the Adobelive YouTube channel. That is where you can get notifications and updates and all of the awesome things that are happening here on Behance. And we've got also a little tab up above the chat pod today. So if you would like to make some recommendations for future guests or nominate yourself, you can check out that tab for more information on how to do that. But yeah, without further ado, Cory, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, the kind of stuff you like to make? We're going to need to know your favorite flavor of ice cream, of course, because
Oh
we
my
ask the
God.
real questions here.
The
And
important
then,
questions.
yeah, the important questions. And then give us a rundown on what we're going to be working on today.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I think this is my third or fourth live stream with Adobelive, so I love it. I love you guys. Let's see, a little bit about me. I am a queer graphic designer here in Portland, Oregon. My pronouns are he and him. I have been working in graphic design for about 8 years now. So I'm currently a senior designer. I work at Stanford University full time, but I also do a lot of freelance projects on the side. And I love working with small businesses. I do a good amount of work for some of my friends' businesses here in Portland. And kind of anything from small branding projects to social media content to website design stuff. So I kind of feel like I do it all. I love doing it all. I love everything that I do. Favorite ice cream flavor has to be Chunky Monkey from Ben and Jerry's.
Okay, good,
Yep.
good. You
Yep.
passed. You passed the vibe check, Cory.
Good. Okay. That's an important one. Chunky Monkey or fish food. Fish food is definitely a close second.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Also passes the vibe check.
Awesome. So I guess without further ado, I can show you my website really quickly just to give you a little peek about the kind of design stuff that I've done. I think I really need to update my little picture on my website here. But I did this really cool kind of dual scroll website.
Ooh.
And this actually was one of my last Adobelive projects. It was a branding project for a queer community center, queer hub online.
I was there. It was great.
Yeah, you were moderating it. That was
Mhm.
awesome. I've made Instagram face filters before, which is a ton of fun, a ton of work. Instagram carousel posts. I do a lot of editorial images for Stanford, and so pulling together different images in Photoshop and figuring out a concept that works with whatever article is being arted. I've done podcast branding. I've done website design. So kind of the whole thing. If you want to check out my website, it's CoryAllenHall.com. Cory Allen Hall on Instagram too. If you'd like to give me a follow over there, I would love if you slipped into the DMs and said hi. So that's kind of me. I will talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. So I don't know if whoever is watching, if you saw my reel on Instagram, but I found this really cool book on the street in Portland, Oregon. It is this it was on a bridge just flapping around in the wind, and it's a book on Michelangelo and all of the work and artwork that he's created in his life. Sculptures, architecture, and things like that. And I brought it home and I kind of was okay, this would be a really cool scrapbook project. There's so many cool sketches. There's a lot of cool typographic inspiration. And so, instead of kind of tearing the book apart, what I decided to do was scan it into the computer and just start pulling together different images. And I decided maybe I can make a couple of cool poster series using this book as inspiration.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's something that I like to do a lot. I like to kind of take tangible elements and bring it into my design. And so having this physical object next to me and then bringing it into the computer and playing around with it in Illustrator and Photoshop is just one of my favorite things to do. And so kind of like looking at my design process when I start a project like this, I take whatever inspiration it is that I found and I kind of start to blow it apart into like mood boards and like type and inspiration boards. And so for this project in particular, I pulled out a number of sort of like keywords that would help guide the direction that I want to take the design in. And so for someone like Michelangelo, a lot of the words that came to mind were architectural. He was an architect. He was also a sculptor. Modern, although like for us, the Renaissance isn't modern, but for his time, he was extremely modern in his way of thinking and his methodology around art. Ligatures, and I completely spelled that wrong here. Ligatures. No, that's right. Ligatures. And then, which is kind of, I mean, in typography, that's when two letters sort of tie together. So it could be like the slope of an F tying into an I. But ligatures is like a broader term, just means to tie or bind things together. Renaissance, Michelangelo existed in the Renaissance, the High Renaissance, 1495 to 1520. And so that feels like a good keyword. And then humanist, which I did spell that wrong. Humanist.
This is I feel like such a relatable moment though, because I have done this. So don't worry. Honestly, I don't know what humanist means, but it sounds awesome.
I like the sound of it.
Yeah, I like good sound.
It's a fun sounding word. So humanist, beauty, proportions, order, rationality. And so kind of based on these keywords, I browsed the internet, I scoured Instagram, and I just found some images that could kind of help guide the direction that I want to take these posters in. And there are a lot of places that I go for inspiration. I mean, of course, Behance is a really fantastic place to go look for inspiration. There's a lot of different filters that you can add in, graphic design, branding, posters, typography. But I also go to a couple of like Type Foundry websites. So if I skip on over to here, so like I mentioned, Behance, like I would probably go into the graphic design hashtag and just kind of see what comes up and then start pulling images into Illustrator. But some other places I might like go on to, oh no, my favorite Type Foundry is on strike apparently, so I can't show you their website today. But Adobe Fonts, also really great place to go and look for inspiration, especially for typography. I use the font pack section a lot. And so kind of like browsing through my like usual sources of inspiration is where I pull together image mood boards. And that just like guides the visual direction that I want to go. And it helps to guide the color palette. It helps to guide some of the like what elements there are, whether they're hand-drawn elements or whether there's more like structural elements and like grid type of elements like how there is here, as well as typography. So like we've got a kind of a broad array of different types of type. We've got serif, we've got some sans serif, we've got something that feels very calligraphic over here on the left. We've got very orderly and some kind of more organic shapes. And so this is all gonna like really come in handy as I'm designing these posters. And then I scanned in images from this book. And so that's also what I'm gonna be working with here. So like I pulled out some of my favorite scans from this book and just kind of plopped them into a mood board here.
Nice. And I feel like, you know, you have a lot of different elements of inspiration and everything you're drawing from, but with the mood board that you have on the left there, I feel like while there's a lot of different elements there, you've chosen images that do all seem to lead to the same vibe for me. Like I can see the future of this project in what you've gathered here, which I think is really great.
That's awesome. That's really great feedback too, because that means that the mood board is successful. It's like conveying a very specific vision that like, even as someone like you who's kind of coming in cold, you can kind of see the direction that I want to go in. And so if I was working with a client on this project, then that's exactly the outcome that I would hope for, that we have sort of a shared vision around where we want this to go. And so, you know, kind of having this backup of the keywords that you're going for, how you define them, so you make sure you and the client are aligned on definitions of those keywords, and then putting it all together in a mood board. And I want to get to designing, so we're gonna just like move quickly here. But I also started pulling together a typographic mood board, and so pulling together different type samples that I thought sort of conveyed a lot of these keywords that felt in line with the graphic mood board, and that could also work with the scans that I have. And so we can kind of see, we've got pretty, I don't know, I would call this a kind of an architectural typeface here. It's sturdy, it's bold, it feels a little bit
Mm.
modern, but it's also got serifs. We've got something like this that is extremely
Oh,
architectural and
wow.
like very beautiful. I'm excited to use this one. I love this one a lot.
Yeah, it's
Um,
really unique.
this one is really kind of cool. I don't I don't even know what I would like call this one here. It's like I honestly just kind of want to use it. But what I really like about it is it's a variable font, and so I can
Uh,
drag the thickness of it.
yeah, see, I was gonna ask, like, first of all, the title fungal is
Yep.
like really amazing. It's perfect for that. But I was gonna ask, like, all of these design elements kind of in there with all of the symbols, is that something you can alter? And is it attached to each letter like that? And then you can, I assume you could,
Yeah, so I
decide
can
whether to
like
do with or without. Oh,
I can grow it.
wow.
So like I could take it all the way down to 0
Mm-hmm.
and or I can go and just kind of expand it all the way out. And so
Oh,
it's like tied to each letter, but I do think that like kind of going back to that word ligature that I talked about earlier, I think that they do kind of connect and morph depending on which letters you put next to each other. And
nice.
so yeah, I mean I can't even imagine the amount of work that was put into this
Oh,
typeface,
yeah.
but
Oh,
like
yeah.
I love it and I am so glad that I found it. We've got just like a lot of different, and then, kind of talking about like some symbology. Like the book that I have has a couple of really cool symbols and like
Mm.
house crests and stuff in it. And so maybe I can find a way to incorporate some of those into the poster. Um, this like super architectural typeface that looks almost like it could be on the side of an old Romanesque building.
Oh, yeah.
And so, we've got like a lot to work off of here, which is, I can't stand like starting a design process and then getting stuck somewhere. And
Hmm.
so I try to kind of just like pull as much as I can together so that if I am feeling a little bit sticky, then I have something to go back to just to like reground the design process.
Absolutely.
Um,
I feel like that's a really great point because you've kind of, what you've done is you've organized and you've checked all the boxes. So now all really that's left is to express yourself
yep.
creatively, and then like you said, if you get to the point where like, I don't know if this is working, you don't have to restart a whole new, like research
Yep.
portion of the project. You just go back to your base.
Yep. And that's the kind of like pretty essential prep that when you're working with a client, especially as a freelancer, you don't want to be wasting time because you're either wasting your own time or you're wasting the client's money. And so
Hmm.
it's really good to like have this sort of backup and it's definitely a process. It's something that it takes a while to like figure out what works best for you.
Hmm.
Here I just pulled a lot of these are the like different chapters from the book that I found, and so this will make up like probably the bulk of the copy that I use in these posters, just so that I have like elements to work with that I can,
Hmm.
use bigger elements. I can use dates, I can use Roman numerals, I can use the chapter titles as like titles for the posters themselves.
Hmm.
And then there were a couple of poems in the book too that Michelangelo had written. And so if I want to use like bigger chunks of text, then I've also got that fallback onto as well.
All of those titles of chapters also read like fiction novels I would buy.
Right?
Like they sound very like magnificent. I
I
love it.
know. They're very like evocative. Like the giant emerges, God's
Yeah.
terrible vicar. I'm like, who is
Yeah.
he? I
An
need to know
Age of
him.
Lions. That sounds like the next Game of Thrones like
Uh,
novella.
literally, literally. So I think that's actually feels like a good place to start. So I'll be building these primarily in Photoshop, these posters primarily in Photoshop. We're
Mhm.
gonna see how many we get to, because I have a vision and I would like to create a series of posters, but I also know we're
Mhm.
working on a limited amount of time. So if anyone in the chat has questions about anything or like has a question about a process or how I did something, then like
Mhm.
I'm happy to like pause and do that. So what I did here in Photoshop was I pulled some of those images that I had showed you earlier in Illustrator,
Mhm.
and I think I'm going to use them as kind of the backdrops for these
Mhm.
posters.
Okay.
Um, and also kind of use them to like dictate the theme of the poster.
Mhm.
And so, let's see. I think we've got like a lot of really cool motion in here. And because of the nature of these scanned in images, we've also got um, some really nice textures. So like I'll probably make this a little bit bigger as a
Yeah.
background image so that it's a full bleed to kind of match some of the other ones. But
I
it's
love
got
it.
that like kind of automatically like the
Yeah,
scanned in texture. It's a little
across there.
green.
Very nice.
And to have the juxtaposition between this man who like looks like I
He's
don't want
like,
to do this.
where am I?
Please, someone help me.
He looks like he's forgotten his own name, basically.
He
It's like,
he does, which is how I feel a lot of the time too. I
yeah.
relate to this man a lot.
It's my favorite though. Like those two right there are some of my favorite, but that could change as we kind of get into a lot of the process here and see more of the details. We do have a question in the chat from Ray. Ray wants to know, how long do you spend designing a mood board? Like we've gone through this really in-depth, awesome process of the preparation, but how long does that usually take to get through that process for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think that it can vary on sort of like the scope and the scale of the project. I try
Mhm.
not to spend too much time on it, if only because I try to go with my gut on a lot of the images that I'm looking for. So like
Mhm.
once I've established the direction or like coming up with those conceptual terms or those like guiding terms was really vital for me because once I have those are sort of the guiding principles of creating the mood board. And so
Mm.
then I kind of just try to go with my gut and bang it out as quickly as possible. You know, I want to be thoughtful about it, but at the same time, um, you know, for me at least, a lot of the design process is about sort of like going with what feels good
Mhm.
and getting it out there, getting it onto the paper, getting it out, getting the idea out, and then flowing with it and seeing how it goes. So that's kind of why I choose to not spend a ton of time on mood boards.
And there's like I'm sure all of us have been here before where like you're trying to get inspired and, you know, find that power and inspiration behind what you're going to do next. So you go to Pinterest, but there's a fine line between like finding inspiration and like falling down the deep hole of looking at so much other input that you start to feel either a little self-conscious and like unmotivated for your own work, or now you've just been on Pinterest all day and you're not prepping for anything
Yep.
anymore. So like trimming that down, I'm sure also like kind of cuts that out if you have a set plan for how you're going to do it, rather than like maybe I'll get on Pinterest and noodle around for a while until I've made 3 mood boards for nothing I want to work on. I just thought these pictures were cool.
Literally. And it's like, you're so right. It's so easy to get sucked into that process because, like, as designers, we're also like, we get excited when we see cool stuff. And
Oh yeah.
I personally get really distracted. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, if I don't have something to kind of like help guide me, then I'm distracting myself and I'm getting lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, oh, it's just not really good. It's not working out.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so kind of what I'm doing here is I'm taking like the chapters from this book and trying to like assign them into some of these posters. Just to kind of like, this will help me sort of like set a tone and a theme for these
Mhm.
posters going forward. I think I'm gonna change the typeface. I like this square display, which I found it on Adobe fonts. So if anyone's looking for that one, and you're
Yeah,
on
this
Adobe
is
fonts, you can
this is
download it.
gorgeous. The joining of the elements in the center of the W was actually amazing. It's almost like these sharp thorn points that make a triangle, and I just think that's super cool.
Yeah, it's like this is kind of like that ligature that we were talking
Yeah.
about of connecting these points together. And it somehow feels both like classical and modern.
Hmm.
And so, you know, that's going back to those keywords that I've described earlier. We have both like Renaissance and we have modern. And so, again, that's why it's like really helpful to have those. And so I think, you know, these are kind of getting lost on the
Yeah.
darker backgrounds. And so popping them over into this
Adds a little more substance to it, so the readability is there against quite detailed backgrounds.
yeah.
I think it's a great choice. We've got a lot of people in the chat who are definitely feeling like they agree with us. Fergie says that sounds like me on Pinterest, making 1,000 boards of cool pretty things I will never use for anything. I know, girl, like I'm looking for reference for a painting I want to do and I end up with a board of like the coolest boots I found today. It just, you know, you
Yep.
gotta restrain yourself sometimes. Julia Vaca in the chat, it's good to see you. Julia,
Julia.
welcome in. She says, oh my God, these posters. Yes, I am very excited. Also, Cory did mention earlier the Instagram reel that he made, and I really wanted to call attention to it because I was very impressed with it, and I thought it was wonderful. If at some point you guys want to see not just the awesome art we're making today, but the journey he kind of went on, the little adventure of like finding this book and everything, there's a really cool Instagram reel on his Instagram that you could totally check out. Yeah,
Thank
Clever
you.
Devlin agrees. Oh, no problem, dude. I felt like I was like, I want to walk around in Portland and stumble upon a Fated Destiny book that will help me make an art I want to do that. Like,
Well, come to Portland sometime. Maybe we'll stumble across something. We can make
yeah,
fun designs off of it.
would love that. I
Yeah.
feel like that in itself is like an exciting, series in general. And then you found this book that's just like incredible. So this is so cool. So you're placing in all of the titles and stuff for these. And are you going to, because we have a lot of options here, and I know in the reel you showed a lot of very cool approaches to incorporating the design elements with the text, with the images. Are you going to be pushing a lot of the images to show through, or are you going to experiment a lot with like obscuring a lot of things? Because I know that there was a lot of really cool ideas I saw there, and I'm excited to see like how like the balance of that is going to go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think for some, I will probably put a little bit more emphasis on the image itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it might sort of depend on I guess I'm feeling like these titles here at the top are like the theme of each poster.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think maybe it'll kind of depend on the theme itself. So like the making of a sculptor, that might be a little bit more important to show more of the images because we want to put a little bit more emphasis on like what's going on there and like speak to that. Whereas something that's really emotional sounding, like Il Magnifico's Pleasure, like that, we might want to do something that's a little bit more like bold and evocative. And so I would feel better about obscuring the background image itself because of how emotional sounding that title is.
And it's like a secret, that's what it kind of feels like. And I feel like this
Wow.
is this like powerful font in that bold. This looks like something I would see on a shelf, like a book that I would buy and like, keep it hidden. Like this is like a secret book.
It is. You're like, it's your dirty secret book.
Yeah, like hide it under my other books as I go up and
Uh-huh.
But it's really cool. It's got that vibe and I love it.
It does kind of feels like a book cover to me. There is something like very kind of like book covery about this for sure.
But in a good way, totally in a good way.
Yeah. But I like what you said too of like the secret and feeling like we're obscuring parts of the image that like that's a really good that's a good vibe for that one, I think.
I feel like obscure is a good word there, right? Because it's not covered. There's a deliberate nature to obscuring rather than something being covered up. And we got Ryan in the chat saying, I could always use some help with Instagram. Me too. I feel like I'm on an Instagram journey. I know a lot of folks in the chat, we've been talking about Instagram. And that is, like kind of part of our theme today of like making these thumb stopping posts and stuff. And I feel like we're really doing that with like these bold things. And I think what's really awesome about the nature of this project is not just the magical way that you've come to these images and not just like the bold, punchy yet classical kind of vibe it's got, is that I feel like I want to find stuff in these images. You know what I mean? Especially this one. I feel like I want to look at all the details and I don't want to scroll past this on the timeline. I feel like there's an adventure here for me to have.
I love that. That's actually, that makes a lot of, I honestly hadn't really thought about that when I was like conceptualizing these, but having, like multi layers and like depth with each one and like wanting to kind of dig in and like see what it is you might be missing. A lot of these images lend themselves really well to that with the amount of detail that they have. And so, maybe that's something that we can kind of play around with, is like having different scales and different different like levels of hierarchy to kind of draw the eye in and kind of make you want to stick around and like go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I agree. Because, you have like these larger design elements, but I think, when you scroll and you look through these images, you can have like pieces that are very obvious, but then kind of make your audience really want to find what you've added to it as well, like little secret pieces. We can keep the secrets happening with the project, maybe.
It's a theme. It's a theme, and I think we got to go with it.
Alive.
Keep the secret alive. I love
Fergie
that.
says, "Is this from Adobe fonts? It's so fancy. I need." I think so. Was this one of the ones that was Adobe
Let's
fonts?
see. So are we talking the date range here, or this sort of, I don't know, old world font?
Let's do both, because I have a hunger for both of them, and I would maybe like to snag them both too.
Yes. So New Spirit is the one that this date is in, and that is available on Adobe fonts.
Okay.
The other one, let's see. Sorry, I'm bopping around a lot. This one is called Trickster. It's from Type Foundry, a French Type Foundry called Velveteen. Okay. And I was hoping to show you their website, but apparently they're on strike now. I think that it's because of what's happening in France with the like labor
retirement
strikes.
Age increasing. Yeah.
So check this website out. They're really great. They are all open source fonts. They're all completely free. You can use them anywhere for any reason at all, whatever you want, commercial or personal use. Nice. And so that's what this one is. It's Trickster by Velveteen.
Looks like we're getting some links in the chat from Wade. Thank you so much, Wade. Also, we've got Claudie in the chat. It's good to see you, Claudie. Julia saying, "Oh my God, all my BFFs are here." Oh. I love it. Also, I want to just like greet some folks that I haven't called out by name, because Patrick is here. Unicorn, our friend, is here. I think I said hello to Fergie, but Fergie, it is always good to see you, and I will say hello again. We've got Clever Devlin in the chat, and Sean Kozel, who is on Adobelive this week. So it's good to see you, Sean. We've got Annika in the chat, Oliver, Jack Watson, Roxanne, Gareth. It is good to see all of our friends hanging out with us here today. I'm loving this bold circle, by the way. I'm loving like just the element of like adding shapes with the text, like peeking through the shape, like a little window too. Very secret.
There's something about, it is very secret. It's like especially Tyranny of Tombs, I think of like, little small hidden places and like you're
nooks and crannies.
And so like, that's kind of, I think, what I'm looking for. And I'm thinking about like, if I were to take us back to the type or the mood boards that I made, there is this one that I am thinking about with this one that I like. The way that these like letters overlap in a way that makes it almost like you abstract them in a way. And so I think that's kind of like what I'm trying to emulate here is the black on the white, and it's almost less about what it says and more about like how it functions as a design element, which is something that I like to play with a lot in my design practice.
The shape and the feel of it. And I think too, when a font like this, when it's like close together like that, you're right, it does present itself as a design element that you can also interact with in the way of reading it, which is really cool. But it feels like somebody has stacked something around, which I think is really cool, because it almost becomes more physical, like something I could put my hands on rather than something I'm just looking at with my eyes.
Yeah, it's giving architectural. It's giving,
which is one of our words today.
It's one of our words. That's why we make the words, because they really help us. But let's see. I'm not sure if I'm loving this type combination here, but I think that we're getting a little bit of, showing these different sizes of circles, how it interacts with like the faces in the background. So there are all of these like things to take into consideration with how these elements work together. But we're messing around right now, so we'll see how everything starts to feel. And then maybe
I love the experimentation, like just kind of placing and vibing with it and seeing where it goes. I do have a question personally as
Uh-huh.
you know, kind of make your way through this portion where you're experimenting and dropping things down. And do you ever find like you come to the point where you're just like messing with it too much? I feel like I feel like that sometimes in my own work where I'm experimenting and I am doing that process, but sometimes I don't know like where that moment is when it's like, am I pushing this too far and it's not working, or is there still something left to do? Sometimes I can't discern, and I wonder if you feel like that too sometimes, and if you have a way to solve that. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do get to that space a lot too. I mean, I think that it's kind of like I have a lot of artist friends who experience that too. If it's like, okay, when do you decide when this is done? Because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as like creators, it's really easy to tinker away forever on something.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's kind of why it's helpful to like work quickly and just sketch things out and like go kind of on my gut with things, because I throw it all onto the piece of paper, I throw it all onto the computer, and then I'm able to take a step back and
Mm-hmm.
step away from it and do a gut check and just sort of see when I come back to it, see how I feel that it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I think my best advice and what I try to practice, especially if I feel like I'm maybe tinkering away on a small detail that doesn't quite matter as much, is to work quickly and then know when to like take a break and know when to step away.
Mm.
But yeah, it can be difficult. It can be hard to know like when to sort of draw that line, which is why
Yeah.
I'm also like, you're seeing me kind of like hop pretty quickly between these posters, because I, you know, I want to kind of just like keep the ideas flowing. And so as I'm thinking of things, I want to just like get it out.
Yeah. I think that's personally how I work too. It's just like kind of skipping around because I'll have
Oops.
an idea and I want to like try to bring that into being. And so sometimes that might mean jumping to something else real quick, especially in a project where you have like this spread of different things. And if you're, you know, putting a little bit of energy into each one, I think it does actually work towards making them all very cohesive as well as a series, you
Yeah.
know, when you're kind of splitting it up. And I actually heard something yesterday that kind of reminded me of it when you were sharing advice just now. I was watching that show Next in Fashion and they had Tommy Hilfiger on, and Tommy Hilfiger said something like your first gut instinct is the right answer.
Yep. Oh man, I relate to that so hard with like not even just design, but like my personal life. It's like
Yeah.
go with
Yes.
your gut, go with your gut on things. And
Mhm.
yep, and that's exactly like what you're talking about. I like you mentioned with your own design process. Sometimes it's better to just like float around and I look at this as sketching almost,
Mhm.
right? And it's
Yeah.
like what we talked about of like it keeps me from getting stuck because I'm going off of my gut, looking at these as a series, looking at my mood board, going back and forth. And then I'm able to zoom out and say like, okay, now I can tweak this. So like, oh, I added this green here. So maybe do I want to make a little bit, a pop of green somewhere in here? Or
Yeah.
if I like the way that this typeface is working here, can I incorporate a version of that here? Like maybe I do some kind of mask with these words to like
Mhm.
bring in a little bit of this element here so that we have distinctly unique posters that also are tied together by common elements. And that's especially important to me if I'm making something for a client or for Instagram, is like, you know, you want to create a variety of things. You want to create something that has a lot of interest, but with that variety, you still want it to be tied together with something. And so,
Yeah. Give it purpose and it has like it's saying something. And I think like like advice, inspiration from other mediums too is always a really great way to solve problems in your own realm. And I think that you have in this project like so many different elements of like not just design, but we're talking architecture, we're talking, you know, Renaissance and like these classical art mediums and their styles aside from just like the modern creation of like posters. And so looking at that and taking inspiration from those places can really help solve like modern problems. And I think
Yep.
fashion specifically has helped me sort through a lot of problems in design, because I think of it differently when I think about a different medium, you know, and that going with that gut feeling, I feel like one of the things I really took away from it too is like your gut feeling that you have, that doesn't necessarily mean you must go with that exact initial idea, but that gut feeling could have multiple ends, right? It's just like
Yep.
that expression in that direction. So if you come back to that gut feeling, you could still have multiple choices and multiple options to choose from that, but reverting to that first initial burst of creative energy, I think can always help you solve problems. And if they do it
Yeah.
in fashion, we can do it in design.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's, I think like a lot of creative practices are really kind of the same in that way, right? Like if you're a
Mm,
creative person, then, you know, like knowing to go with your gut on something or understanding what your process is and like leaning into that. Like I think that those can be really like you can find similarities between that across so many different creative industries.
mm,
And so, as someone who's really creative, I find inspiration like you in fashion. I find it in interior design, I find it in architecture. And so
mm.
if I'm able to incorporate some of those inspirations into my design, like because I really love architecture, creating designs that are architectural in nature, that like blends some of my interests together, and it really helps to drive me, especially if I find myself getting lost on something.
Yeah,
um,
that was going to be my next question, is like what non visual design things in the world do you feel inspire your work, or at least like sometimes it's not necessarily you're making a derivative of something that's like not a painting or not a poster, but the things that you see in life that you think, oh, now I have to make something.
yeah, I think for me it's always sort of been architecture and interior design.
Nice.
I just find myself really drawn to, and I mentioned this with the book, but I find myself drawn to like tangible things that I can like touch and put my hands on.
Mm,
And as sort of like a digital designer, it can be hard to find that feeling.
hmm.
And so that's why I find myself like particularly drawn to the tangible like interior design and architecture. And when I'm traveling, or when I am, even just like bopping around my own town, I find myself like really pretty drawn to the way a building is, like the shapes of a building and the way a building is constructed. And I'm able to like, if I take pictures of that, or if I do a little bit of extra research and understand the process behind it or understand the reasoning behind it,
Hmm.
then I can begin to apply some of those similar concepts to my design practice. And so like that's where if I am finding inspiration, that's kind of where I am like going to look for it. Okay, I'm pulling this little guy out of there. I love the shape of this here.
Oh yeah.
And it's interesting because this is like a page from the book. So I'm not even sure why the whoever created this book made this in this shape, but
Yeah, it's
I'm very
very like
thankful.
unique.
Very thankful.
I noticed, just like to point out one of your techniques with the tools there, is that you're using the magnetic lasso tool
Mhm.
for that, and I love it, especially with something that has like it's a different shape, than
Yep.
you normally would find, but it's also very organic around the edges too. Once you get right up close, is the magnetic lasso tool something that you find you use often in your process?
Yes, I definitely use it a lot. I will probably use it multiple times in this session, actually. And it's funny because I use a magic wand tool a lot too.
Hmm.
But in cases like this, I I I almost want like the utmost amount of control over like the shape that I'm pulling out. And so I gravitate more towards the magnetic lasso tool just because it's a little bit like more intuitive or like quicker for me.
Hmm.
Let's see what font. Bachelor.
I feel like too, if you're designing, I'm assuming that you're designing with a mouse today.
I'm on a trackpad on my laptop.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
But
I know. A lot of designers don't do that.
well, it's always really great to like to learn and understand what people are using, but perhaps like using the magnetic lasso tool when you're not using a stylus specifically can like really help you find those organic shapes that adhere in the way that you want and accurately, rather than trying to use the regular lasso tool with your mouse, or clicking with the polygonal lasso tool and getting the sharp edges that you might not be desirable for the project. So
Yeah. And I mentioned like with this book that I found, I think that my initial thought was like, oh, I'll cut it out by hand. I'll use like an X-Acto knife and scrapbook it and stuff. And I think I'm sort of more inclined towards that approach, which is probably why for me I go towards the magnetic lasso tool, because it feels like I'm kind of doing it by hand, and I just really sort of like that. But yeah, I've often thought about like getting a pad, like a Wacom pad or something, because of how much I do like to do things by hand. I haven't pulled the trigger on it.
Well,
So here I am
it's
on my
one of those
trackpad.
things that's difficult, to make the decision, because you got to be, I feel like it's a big ticket item, so you got to kind of like decide whether or not you are going to go that route. For me, I used a hand me down Intuos tablet for like the first 10 years that I was designing, before I finally was like, I'm gonna buy one, and I got like the Cintiq, because I was like, I'm
Mm,
pretty sure I want to paint on the screen. I'm pretty sure I want that. But then every time I thought, because I will run tools into the ground before I justify buying another one. So it
yep.
was like, I finally decided to buy it when I like could not use the other the other tablet. I was like, all right, maybe now is when I make the choice.
I mean, I am the same way. I'm like, I want to like make sure that I'm really, really using the things. I hate buying something and like either not using it as much as I think that I will, or like being
Regretting it.
or regretting it.
Yeah.
And so something that does blow my mind though is, do you use your Cintiq pad for just like clicking around on things, or are you only using it when you're designing?
It really depends, because sometimes I'm like in the zone, like doing paintings, and so I will, if I have something on that, because it counts as another display for my computer. So I have 3 monitors and a Cintiq.
Oh my God. Three
So
monitors?
I do. And that's because, like, for example, for anyone who's curious, I am on a live stream right now, so I have my chat and everything up on one where I can communicate with the team and with the audience. I have my like my streaming windows where I can see the stream and the webcams and the guest and everything on one monitor. And then if I was the guest today, I would use the other monitor only for reference. And then I have my Cintiq where I'm painting. So it's like the amount of stuff you have to have up when you run a live stream, and then you're doing production and you have to have all those programs up, it can get really cluttered. So I have
Yeah.
a lot of displays.
Well, and I'm kind of amazed because I feel like I've tried plugging my laptop into 2 different displays, and it gets really hot and kind of angry at me.
You
So
got
do
you
you
have to
okay, what do you do?
I know that feeling. It used to happen to me for a long time. I had to, I don't know, are you working on a Mac or a PC?
I'm working on a MacBook Pro.
Okay, I work on a PC, and I built my PC and I replace the parts. So I upgrade it constantly. So if I am doing stuff and like my
Gotcha.
computer, I could fry an egg on it, then I will upgrade it. Or sometimes, and this I feel like is good advice for anybody in the chat who is just running intensive programs, or maybe you in chat, you want to start live streaming. It's always good to check and see what your computer is actually running, like when it starts up, and anything that's running in the background, because there are a lot of programs that can bog down your system when you go to live stream and all that kind of stuff. And you can fix that just by altering those things. And maybe you don't need, you know, Spotify. I don't know that Spotify is super intensive, but maybe you don't need all this stuff running every time your computer's on. And so those things are important. But yeah, I have a lot of displays, and so I don't usually have those windows like on my Cintiq where I could be clicking around. Like you mentioned, like, do I use the Wacom stylus to draw only, or am I using it like I might use a mouse? I've got those things on the other displays, but if I'm in the zone and I have windows up on my Cintiq, I will use it like a mouse for sure.
I see.
But typically it's just like for designing. I suppose sometimes I do graphic design with the stylus. But I can't really do graphic design without also painting with my brush sometimes. So
yeah. Well, and I ask because I know designers who like use their tablet to like just do everything on the computer. And so that's like, whereas I'm working on this little tiny rectangle on my laptop, some people are able to do that. But it like, depending on the type of work that you do, like you said, if you're painting a lot, then like it makes so much sense to have that. But like maybe it doesn't quite make as much sense for the other things that you're doing. And so to like have a flexible workspace and flexible equipment is like also so key to being a good and successful designer. Is like you really like know your tools, you know them well, and you know like when to use them and maybe when to use other tools.
Yeah.
It's like what we're talking about with using this magnetic lasso tool. I'm like, okay, I just know that I work really well with it, and that it gives me the like effect that I want. It gives me the speed and accuracy that I want. And so I just like, I gravitate towards it a lot.
And the tools you use, it's like the same as I feel about like using Photoshop. There are a lot of different ways that you can achieve the same goal as someone else in Photoshop, but you find your own groove for how to make a poster or how to make a painting. And sometimes it's not necessarily about like which tool is superior to be using. What's really important is how well do you articulate yourself and make your work and hone your craft with these tools. If using a stylus is going to make you feel like you're disconnected from your artwork and you're not able to maneuver the way that you need to, then that's not the superior tool for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, I think that's something that's always kind of like astounded me about Photoshop, is how robust of a system it is. I mean, because like you said, it truly does, like, it gives you the basic building blocks to do literally anything. And when one person picks up those building blocks, they'll make something one way, and someone else could pick up different building blocks and make a very similar thing, but like using completely different tools. And so it just like, it gives you like a really, really specific amount of control over your process.
Yeah.
That is like really kind of truly amazing, and it's mind boggles me all the time.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I would just like to say, first of all, I love the pop of green that you're adding in here. And second, I love that you have added these coins to that design, because when I first saw that font that you have chosen, my first instinct that I thought immediately was, it looks like the cutouts look like iron laid into wood.
Oh, like, interesting. Like these cutouts here.
Yeah, it looks kind of like, you know, like the iron doors that are like wood wrapped in like iron, and stuff like that. And so I think it's really interesting that I was thinking of like iron wrapped or poured into wood, and then we have like metal coins kind of going with this. So I just think that's really cool.
I love that that's working. Oops, because that shows that this concept is all coming together in a really good
really
way.
is. It really is. It's very, I feel like you've got a lot of things that are different about each poster, but it all feels like a series. Oops. Definitely. It all feels like it is cohesive, even though each is individually unique.
Yeah, thank you. This is like, this green kind of came from, if I go back to the mood board, it comes from, I was really liking this pop of green here, this sort of green here, and there's something about the green that to me with these very organic colors, these paper-like colors, these scanned in and like slightly muted colors, there's something really nice about a bold pop of
Hmm.
something. And so that's kind of where the green was coming from is like in this poster, for instance, it is the poster. It's really big and bold, but
Hmm.
for, I don't know, God's Terrible Vicar over here, then it's just the nice little pop that like
Hmm.
gives just enough contrast over Mary's face.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like too is this neon like green color is not something that you would ever see in the like the source material, the inspirational material here with the architecture and all of the stuff about Michelangelo, and like incorporating it really well as you have makes it like you can obviously see a theme here, but that pop of green is undeniably modern. You
yep.
know, like you can't like there's no question about what exactly you're doing here and the things that you're combining. It's there and it's clear to see, which I think is really really cool because to make it obvious but then also have like all of these little secret things hidden around in the posters, I think adds a lot of really great personality to the project.
Yeah, thank you. I think like yeah, it takes it just I that's why I think it's so helpful to like think through these words and like think through, you know, if we are saying we want it to be architectural and modern, but like with a Renaissance hint, then
Hmm.
like how can we make something that's modern? We add this like did neon green even exist in the Renaissance? Like
I don't know. I have
is
no
it like
idea.
I can't imagine that it's a color that even like maybe on a lime kind of, but like you don't see it in paintings. Like it's
Mm.
there's something that's just very digital about this shade of green. So I'm like, I don't know. Did it exist?
Yeah, that's why I kind of was thinking like I can't when I rack my brain, I can't find that shade anywhere. And so it's like you can do things that are styled that are, you know, like echoing the Renaissance and echoing those architectural themes and everything, but doing it in that color, it just makes it like it's new. It's old, but it's new.
Yep. So I'm thinking for this, it's something that I love that I'm noticing I think might be new is when I'm copying and pasting this type from Illustrator into Photoshop,
Hmm.
it's taking the font with it too. And
Hmm.
I don't know if it's always done that, but I'm like really loving that it's doing that right now.
This is a
So
great choice for this image, by the way. The font, I was wondering where you were going to incorporate that one specifically, but I feel like this is a pretty cool one for this image because it has like this vibe of like being like open and flowing, and then you have like this open sky, like the drama in the back that is also very
yeah,
open.
and
So that's
it's
pretty cool.
like I was saying earlier that this typeface feels very architectural to me. And so if
Mm,
we're thinking about like the architecture of the background, the making of a sculpture, you know, these are like things that are helping to kind of inform the subtle design choices that I'm making. And that's why
mhm.
it's like really helpful for me to articulate what kind of how I feel about the elements that I'm pulling together and like understand why I've chosen them. Because then if I am feeling lost, I'm like, okay, what are the elements in this photo? They are big architectural buildings. What is the theme? Making of a sculpture. Okay, so like architecture. That's what I'm looking
Mhm.
for. I'll find a typeface that's architectural. And so that like can help to solve one of those like brain block moments that if you're feeling a little bit lost, you've got some guidance for you that's like built into the process.
Yeah. And also, if I can ask, you were like kind of altering the spacing and like kerning between the
Mm-hmm.
letters there very efficiently and quickly. Were you using like a shortcut for that or
Yeah, so the shortcut that I use is on at least on this Mac keyboard, it's Option, and then I use the left and right keys. And
okay.
so I use this tool a lot. I think that that's something I was in graphic design school for 5 years, and that's one thing that I learned in every type class was how important it is to pay attention to the kerning
Hmm.
between letters and the leading between lines of type. So I'm adjusting the leading with the same Option key, but the up and down arrows instead of the left and right arrows.
Hmm.
And so if I do between two letters, if I've got my cursor between two letters, it gives me the kerning. If
Hmm.
I select the entire block of text and I do option left or right, it does the entire block of text kerning.
Nice.
So those are like, I use those keyboard shortcuts all the time. I find them super helpful, and it just gives you that tiny little bit of extra control that makes a really big difference when you're looking at a poster overall. Those are important details to pay attention
I
to.
feel like I'm going to use that every day now because I've been doing more and more graphic design lately, and I feel like that is something that I could utilize just because sometimes I have like these really big, like funky display fonts, right? And
Yep.
if you, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this, and I'm sure chat, let us know if you have experienced this as well, is like you find a really cool display font. It's funky, it has attitude, it has exactly what you need for a project, but when you start using it, sometimes the spacing on certain symbols and flourishes and things within the font make it look a little unbalanced. Like I feel like I've had that happen to me where I'm like, this is really cool, but if I'm going to use this glyph, then the spacing is weird for so many of these things, and being able to like very quickly alter that I think is going to save me a lot of time and make me a very happy designer.
Yep. And
So,
it's always with the display faces that you need to give it a little bit of extra love and attention, because
yes.
they want to do what they're going to do. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? You got to do what I want you to do here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Your
Okay.
display fonts are drama queens, and they are going to come into the space and take over, and you do have
Uh-huh.
to guide them a little bit. You are a creative
That's
director. They are not in
you're
control.
Oh my gosh. And I understand. I'm a drama queen too. So like I relate to the display faces. I'm like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? But guess what? I'm in
Mm-hmm.
control today. Okay. You're not the
Mm-hmm.
boss.
Let me
So
help you, okay?
you got to use those keyboard shortcuts to help the
Mm-hmm.
little display faces out of being drama queens.
Mm-hmm. Fergie is absolutely loving the font there too. She says that is a stunning font. And then super cool shortcut unlocked. Absolutely. I agree. That's why I was so excited when I saw him do that. I was like, I have to ask him what this is because this is in Photoshop. I usually see like the super cool spacing shortcuts and stuff in like InDesign or Illustrator, and I don't use them as often. And as much as people have told me they don't understand, I do like all of my graphic design until recently with Adobe Express, just in Photoshop, and people are like, but you can do it in Illustrator. I'm like, but I also could do what I want.
Uh-huh.
I can also design how I feel comfortable, and that's in Photoshop. So it's good to have these shortcuts.
Yeah, that's what's kind of, well, I mean, the shortcuts are so great because you can use them across the entire Adobe Creative Suite. And so, like, you can use the same keyboard shortcut in Illustrator, Photoshop, After Effects,
Mm.
Premiere Pro. You can use it in InDesign. And so, super helpful to know that. But I'm just like you, where it's funny because when I started designing, I did a lot of things in Illustrator,
Mhm.
and I find myself doing things in Photoshop now
I
more
love it.
than I ever did. And I think it is because of how it feels like sketching to me. It's because I feel like I can use these different tools over here on the left, the lasso tool to cut things out. And it's like more iterative
Hmm.
and like sketchy process somehow.
Hmm.
Um, it's been really appealing to me
Yeah,
recently.
I agree 100%. And I think, it kind of plays into what we were talking about before of like, there are so many things that you can do in all of these apps. And I feel like if you can find the way that's comfortable for you to do it, then that's how you graphic design. I'm more comfortable in Photoshop. If you are more comfortable in Photoshop, then Photoshop is the graphic design tool. But for other people, maybe where Photoshop doesn't come as naturally and they feel more at home in Illustrator, then Illustrator is the superior tool for them.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that people sometimes forget that your personal passion and your personal joy when you are creating is sometimes like equally as important as your technique, because that is how we become great creators. That's how we become great artists, is like we're finding and expressing that inner joy and like pushing it out so others can see. And it's important, when you're creating your
Yep.
process.
It's so important. I think like It's really easy in this day and age. You know, we get caught up. We have to make money to survive. We have to like please our clients or our company. And it's really easy to get caught up in just kind of like doing the work because you need to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And lose sight of the fact that like we started down this career path because design is something that we're passionate about, or art is something that
Yeah.
we're passionate about, or type is something that we're passionate about. And so like I would really like hate to lose sight of sort of like what got me into design in the first place. And that was because I just like love doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like you said, to take away from the love of that by doing what you think you should do or putting it into a program that you think you should use, just because other people use Illustrator for a lot of things does not mean you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that they work pretty well together too. So if I want to go over into Illustrator and copy it over into Photoshop, I can make it as a smart object, and then I'm able to take it back into Illustrator and edit it back in Illustrator, and then still have it update in Photoshop. And so like kind of understanding the integration between the two is also really kind of it's key to being able to use it effectively in a way that works best for your workflow.
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100%. Also, just, kind of to that, um, kind of remembering why you got started in, creating and in designing, and the juxtaposition between like what you need to do for your clients and what you need to do just for like social media marketing and all that stuff versus what you want to be doing because it strikes your heart,
Mm-hmm.
in a powerful way. What are you like yearning to do? Like, are you doing that thing, or do you have like, tell us if you could have the freedom to do like any kind of project, what would that look like, or what would that be about? If there was no, like, money is no object, time is not a worry, and you don't have to please a client, does that passion project look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I
Big
think
too. So
it's a big question. I think it changes probably quite often for me.
oh yeah.
But I think that what really comes to mind, what I love a lot about design is the storytelling side
Mm,
of it.
mm,
And so I really like creating like short stories through my design, which is why I like doing a project like this, because, we have what's sort of coming together as like a cohesive set of posters.
mhm,
They're each like chapters, literally chapters from the book, but also like visual chapters in
mhm.
this story. And they each have something unique to say, but they tie together really nicely. And so like even the promotional reel that I made for this live stream was something
Mhm.
that I had a lot of fun making, not only because it allowed me to like start conceptualizing these posters, but it also allowed me to like talk and share about what it is that I wanted to do and what I was hoping to convey. And so, I think for me, it's kind of almost like a mixed media of I want to be able to, I would love to be able to just like share ideas in a way that like feels organic and like natural to me.
Mhm.
And that's why it's a hard question to answer, because it changes a lot. It changes like based on my mood and sort of like where I'm at. Um, but I think, okay, on my Instagram there are a number of reels where I'm like doing a design while like talking in the background.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
have been like some of my favorite things to make over the last couple of months, is because I'm like creating designs based off of experiences that I've had in my life that are exactly how I want them to look and feel. And I get to like share a personal story while doing it.
Mhm.
And if I could just like get paid to do that, that would be like so rad. And it
I
like
love
wouldn't
it.
matter to me how long it takes or what the constraints were. It would just be like a fun process.
Yeah, I love it. And I really do think that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to make sure everybody in chat knew about the reel and like really highlight that, is because I feel like before we started this stream, you took me on an adventure, and I was watching the reel and I was feeling like really like I could feel the wind on that bridge on my skin, and I was like, take me here and show me what we're doing with this thing you found. And I feel like it felt like a really authentic message from you, and it felt like I could see the passion that you had for like what you were doing, and I think that you succeeded in like that you were telling a story and taking us on a journey, and it's not just here's a poster. It was look at this, look at the life I lived while I made this, and now you can feel it too when you look at these things that I've created. And I think it's very authentic and it's very powerful.
I love that. Thank you. That's, if as much as I like create things like that for myself, like hearing that it gives someone else a feeling like that is also why I love doing it. And so it just makes me really happy to hear you say that, because I just want to also make other people happy. So,
well, I definitely think you succeeded. We've got the link to the reel in the chat, so definitely check that out. And it sounds like you said you did a few more kind of along the lines of like working and talking. So
yep.
I love that content from you. I'm sure chat will love that content for you. So check out those reels, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
This is really great, by the way, just like how you're placing in all of these sculptures. I feel like it is very like to all of the posters so far, they are really adhering to the title that you have set for them. And this one in particular, I love the way the color of the sculpture images mesh with both portions of the piece, because the background image really is like cut through the middle, right? We have like warm tones and architecture, and then we have like the sky, and I feel like there's a nice contrast on the bottom, but it also really meshes on the top. And I think the way that the scan of the images came in, and I was just thinking this earlier, the scan of the photo, like the page has like wrinkles in it and almost looks like rays of God like coming down from the sky, which is perfect.
Yeah.
Made a way for this.
You're so right.
I was trying to figure out if it was the scan or not, but I think it's the scan, which is perfect.
Yeah, it is. Well, and that's what's, I mean, like the book itself, I literally found this book when it was pouring rain and windy and it was on a bridge. And so like the book itself is like warped and falling apart every time I open it, like pages crumble out of it.
Oh no.
But like when I was scanning it, you can see the kind of like imperfections in even the scan because the paper wasn't sitting flat. And so you've got these like interesting textures that you've got the smoothness here combined with this, combined with like the fold or I don't even know what was happening here. And so, were I to spend more time on this, those are like elements that I think I would want to bring out more, right? For the sake of like time on this live stream, I think that like, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but like, like you said, rays of God, like that's kind of an overarching theme here, especially with like the Renaissance and like spirituality, and like the Catholic Church was, or the family that I think like funded Michelangelo was a very religious and spiritual family. And so that could be kind of a sub theme that like, if I want to, I could very easily in Photoshop I could pull a gradient and do some kind of blending to make it appear as if it is this like fold in the page. And so finding those little bits of inspiration and pulling them out, and, I could add a little bit of extra grain to this background image. Like, I don't know, why don't we do that? Since we're talking about
let's try a little, I like the emphasis on certain things. And I think that's cool too, because like it's not just, I feel like you can find these images probably on the internet, you can go through and find them. And I've seen people do that, and you can do that. But I feel like the personality that this has, because of the way you came to find it, and having the ability to find those moments in the fold of the paper and things that emphasize the vibe of each piece is really, really special. And it just makes it more unique than like anybody else in the whole world who could have done a project like this, because no one has the images the way you have them now, so it's just really cool.
Yeah, totally. And like it makes me think about what we were talking about with Photoshop and just having all of the different really hyper specific tools that can be used, and the use of them changes for each person. It really is a good testament to how like we might all use the same program for something, but the way that we use it is so hyper specific to us and our process.
Oh yeah.
That like, you know, whether it's the nuance of finding something on the ground on the street, or
Mhm.
if it's just like creating something from scratch on the computer, um, that's kind of what makes the design process so magical. Um, I'm like pulling together these letters because I want to like play with that idea of ligature and
Yeah, and it's like I love that like with the N, the F, and the I there, it like all kind of connects on the bottom, and I think that's so cool.
yeah, it's like architectural, it's a little ligature, and that's using that same kerning tool that we talked about before. You know, I think the kerning really like practically, oh, that's nice too, the A
That's
and the
very
S.
nice. I was about to say that is
Oh,
a really nice fit right
wow.
there.
That makes me happy. Yeah, kerning is like a very practical tool because if you're setting big blocks of text like this, right? Like
Mhm.
you want to make sure that the letters are spaced appropriately. If you've got it like too far wide, then that's really difficult to read.
Mhm.
And if you've got it like way, way, way too close, then it just becomes this big block.
Very
But
claustrophobic.
so for this case, we want to kind of set it at the right, give it like enough room to breathe. But for display face like this, you've got more flexibility because the letters are built to be read from further away. They're meant to be more decorative. You can kind of like break them in a way that like this is still legible,
Mhm.
but also is like has a little bit of a design perspective beyond just like the legibility of it.
For sure, for sure. I agree.
Mm.
Also, just to give you a heads up, we have got maybe 15 minutes before the end of our show. So as we kind of experiment and stuff, think about, maybe in 10 minutes or so, we can do like a recap, maybe a little more than 10 minutes,
Okay,
but we want to do a
cool.
recap and stuff. So this is like, if I can just say, this is such an impressive amount of work in less than an hour and a half. Like there, I feel like I have worked longer than this on one single poster. And you have like a series, and not only like a series of posters, but everything is like purposeful and like tied into each other, and you've got like a whole storyline going here, and I just think that's really impressive, and I aspire to have a workflow like this. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with your prep process before you began here, which was very impressive. So I'm gonna have to do that so I can work like Cory.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's truly like the prep work that goes into it, having the time that was spent on the mood board and the time, I mean, I flipped through this book that I found for a couple of
Mhm.
hours. And
Mhm.
so, you know, I'm just like, I guess I'm like knowing my design process itself well enough to know that like I've built the foundation. I'm sketching out really fast. It's actually helpful because I'm talking to you, so I'm even more forced to not think too hard about the choices that I'm making on
Mm.
things. And so, I think that it's iterative, and I appreciate you saying that a lot.
Well, you're
Um,
very welcome. We
how
got
do
Alessandra coming in, by the way. Hello, Alessandra. It's good to see you. Um,
Hello.
and I think I cut you off there. What were you saying?
Oh, I'm trying to decide how I feel about this green over here over this dude because I liked the white was nice.
Mm-hmm.
It made it feel like cohesive, kind of like a book cover, like we were talking about earlier. But green,
I do
white,
like them
green.
both. I think my favorite is the white, but
Yep.
maybe just because like I feel like that font and the size and everything works so good with that photo in the background,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe we can play with like the similar concept in green with a different image because
Maybe
I do like it, but I don't think that saying goodbye to the idea of giant bold green text would be cool. I think we need to try that.
I wonder if we can incorporate some green somewhere in here so that we've got a visual tie-in.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I don't know what that could look like exactly. We're gonna just like see.
Could make the coins green.
So if I like do a quick little bloop, kind of a blend.
Ooh.
And maybe that just like can serve as a little
Little nod.
Just a little nod, a little extra element. Okay, what am I doing? There we go. Oops. Gonna group these. We're gonna duplicate the group. And then just make it like, I don't know if that like makes sense as an element, but if we have, it looks kind of like an emoji
I
to me.
like it. I like it though, in that like having a little spot of the green feels good, you know? And so maybe if you don't feel like the actual coins and stuff, maybe that's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, like going with your first gut instinct is always the right choice, but that first gut instinct isn't singular, it is conceptual. And so
Yep.
if you have like this great idea of popping that green in a tiny way, then just following that path will, you know, be the vibe.
Yeah, I wonder how, I mean, maybe it could be like a little bit of extra pop of typography if we can pull in some kind of grounding element or maybe a date, perhaps. Could
Oh yeah, a
be.
date.
Hey, stop that. There you go. So I like the idea of
Yeah, I'm feeling it.
grounding it somehow, and maybe this is green. I don't know. Let's see
Yeah,
how it
like
looks.
grab that vibe.
Wow, it
I kind of
almost,
like it.
I know. There's something now, I don't know if it's giving me like, now it's almost starting to feel like an old scary movie poster or something. Like,
Oh, with I mean, maybe it's the contrast behind. I wonder if you swapped I mean, the titles are pretty cohesive with the titles being at the top, but if
mhm.
you swapped the title with the date, then that date would be centered in like the shadow of his eye socket right there, and it might like be cool, but I'm not the master of this realm, so I will leave it to you.
See if we maybe center this
Oh,
too.
yeah, that's actually pretty cool.
Oops. I don't know. I mean, we're kind of breaking a pattern by doing this in
Yeah, by
green.
moving it. But I mean, you know, experiment with it.
Yep. And I think, like I said, these feel a lot like sketches to me. And so if I was doing this for a client or if I was doing this for something like when I post it on Instagram, I'll go through and kind of make refinements um, based on having like had some time to sit with it and
Hmm.
see like what makes sense and what works because, you know, this one doesn't have this same element at the top or
And it's
the
definitely one of my favorites too.
Yep. And so it's like, you know, it can begin to wonder if we think about this as a book, if these are chapters of the book, maybe this is the cover. And then
Hmm.
maybe these are like subsequent chapters. And then maybe this is sort of like the closing slide or like the closing page of the book.
Hmm.
And so, you know, I think that, you know, having sort of that kind of like guiding principle is also really helpful to think about like how you might structure a set of posters too.
Yeah, yeah. I loved your thought process on this because I think that I feel like a lot of people have chosen to do like a series of work as like the body of their work, but I feel like also a lot of people struggle with the cohesive nature and thought process behind prepping a solid, strong series of work, right? I feel like it's something a lot of people have the passion to do, but it's not something that a lot of people feel confident in preparing. And I feel like listening to your thought process on this and seeing like, you know, talking about the preparation stage and the research stage and stuff, I feel like really gives me personally a lot of confidence to approach a series myself. And I think that these are things that anybody could listen to on this stream, and gain that confidence no matter what kind of medium they're working with,
Mhm.
you know, because I am predominantly an illustrator, but like I feel like I can use the lessons that you've shared with us today to put together a series of paintings if I want to. I'm sure somebody could listen to this and feel the same confidence when preparing a portfolio piece for logos if they wanted to. I think these are all really great lessons, and you have shown it to us with your own personal flavor and your own personal vibe and passion here. But I think that they're very versatile lessons.
Yeah, thank you. I think I completely agree where it's like, and it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier of like how like a lot of creative mediums are kind of similar in that way. You can take some of the same principles, you can take some of the same process and apply it pretty broadly. Find what works for you and apply it pretty broadly to kind of whatever it is you want to work on.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I find myself wondering if I were to ever like start moving away from design or moving into something else, I know that a lot of the design tools that I've learned would be applicable if I ever wanted to go into furniture design or if I ever wanted to go into architecture, interior design.
I will say that I would love to one day see like a set of like furniture from Cory Hall. I feel like that would be so rad. Just like Cory Hall designs like your epic sitting room, like entertaining room.
Oh
like,
my God.
oh my gosh. I would definitely. I'd go to the show. I would go to the show,
You're
Cory.
really speaking to me right now. That's the push that I need because I'm like, oh, I would love to make furniture. That would be amazing.
I think it would be great. I feel like a lot of your work has like, I don't know if this is what you're going for, but I feel like when I look at a lot of your pieces, I feel like this 70s like magazine expose with an element of like beautiful candid moments, if that makes sense. I don't know.
I'm gonna need to write that down. I want to like capture that.
That's what I feel though, and I feel like it's something that people like have attempted, but if you miss the mark with something like that, then it doesn't come off with the same kind of power. But I feel like I look at your stuff and it's like the right amount of texture, the right amount of like saturation and desaturation, and always really powerful focal points, which I feel like that was like really popular in 70s design. Like instead of taking a picture of somebody, it's like you're seeing the portrait from the side through a mirror, and the mirror is like gilt framed and the clothes are funky and like cool stuff. I feel like I feel that vibe with your work, and I think that era that I feel when I look at your pieces is home to one of the most powerful furniture eras ever, you know, like with the like experimental shapes and the interesting textures and all of that stuff. And so I feel like the Cory vibe could end up being like a very powerful furniture vibe for sure too. So I'm rooting in the background for you for this. If your furniture career ever gets going, I'm gonna be the first one to get me a chair.
Thank you. Oh my God. Well, and I think that would be the first thing that I would want to make is a chair.
Yeah,
would love to make a chair. I have some good family friends who were like super into furniture design, and I made them a thank you card once where I like drew them out a sketch of a chair. And so cool. The like father, the family friend was like, oh my God, I'm gonna need to make this chair someday. I was like, no, you don't. I'm gonna make that chair someday and I'll give you the chair, okay? But you can't steal my chair idea. It's my chair.
We've got Clever Devlin in the chat saying make a book and then the bookshelf and then a coffee table and then make a coffee table book. So you can do everything. You can design the room and then design the items and the entertainment for the room. We are coming to a close on our stream. Okay. However, we've got just a couple of minutes here. So if you want real quick in maybe 2 minutes, if you want to give us a little recap of what you're working on, what we did today, and then also let us know where we can find you online and what I don't know if you have any plans for the future. Let us know about that as well.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Let's see, just a quick little recap. I found a book about Michelangelo online, scanned in a bunch of the images, and have since just been kind of making some sketches, pretty rough versions of some posters that I would like to finish up at some point in the future. And so I think what we could do is I would love it if you could find me on Instagram, and I'll probably post some of these posters on my Instagram at some point. But yeah, I don't know. I think like I'm looking at these posters as kind of chapters from this book, and each chapter has a very specific story. The Making of a Sculptor, honestly, I think this one's my favorite.
I love it. I love it. I love it a lot.
Love the elements. I love the way everything interacts. I love the typography. I love the color usage. But you know, looking at it as kind of a very specific little chapter as a part of this like broader story on Michelangelo that's being told. And you know, again, we've talked about this a lot in this stream, but like how essential it was to have these different mood boards and like pulling everything together this way. I don't think I would have been able to work this quickly and this iteratively without having a lot of that like background work going into it. And so
yeah, it's very well done. We do have to come to a close, but it's been an absolute pleasure hosting you today, Cory. I feel like you've shared so much with us. It was a pleasure just to be able to hang out with you in person, you know. But
come to Portland sometimes.
I will come visit you. And definitely give Cory a follow on Instagram. You will not be disappointed. That is all the time we have for today. Coming up next, we have Design Fix with Claudie, which I hope you will stay tuned for, and we will see you another time, folks. Adios, everybody.
Thank you.